Good evening and welcome to Arirang TV's special coverage of South Korea's 9th nationwide local elections. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. With voting now complete, attention is turning to the first exit poll results, which offer an early glimpse into voter sentiment and the direction of key races across the country. For a closer look at what the numbers reveal, we turn to our Kim Bo-gyang.
Mo-gyan, I'm here at Arirang's Extended Reality XR studio. Let's take a closer look at the voter turnout first. Starting with how many people have voted. Data from the National Election Commission shows that an estimated 61% of the country's eligible voters, that is, those born on or before June 4, 2008, have voted in the election. That means 27,222,808 people out of the 44,649,908 eligible voters have cast their ballots. In each of the past 5 elections, voter turnout has exceeded the 50% mark. The highest turnout over the past 2 decades was recorded in 2018 during the 7th local elections, when more than 60% of eligible voters cast their ballots. The most recent elections saw the lowest turnout, finishing just about 50%. This year, the voter turnout surpassed 60% for the first time in 8 years, showing how enthusiastic voters were. Now, looking at the regional voter turnout, out of the country's 16 provinces and cities, Jeollanam-do province showed the highest voter turnout with 65.7%. But if you combine Gwangju City, as they are set to launch the integrated Gwangju-Jeonnam Special Metropolitan City, the rate stands at 60.8%. The next in line with the highest voter turnout is Gangwon-do province with 64.5%, followed by Gyeongsang-nam-do province with 64.4%. The lowest voter turnout was recorded in Jeju Island, which was 56.4%. Although vote counting is currently underway, the process is still in its early stages. Let's revisit the exit poll results once again. According to the exit polls by public broadcaster KBS, the poll results show that the Democratic Party of Korea was projected to win 14 key races for mayors and provincial governors against the People Power Party's 2. 4 regions are reportedly in tight race, but currently Democratic Party of Korea is leading. Let's specifically take a look at the exit polls for key battleground areas. First of all, for Seoul City Mayor, the Democratic Party of Korea's Chung Won-ho is going up against the People Power Party's Oh Se-hoon, with Chung Won-ho in the lead. Then we have Daegu City, where the Democratic Party of Korea's Kim Bu-gyum is in competition with the People Power Party's Chu Kyung-ho. Currently, the exit poll says Chu Kyung-ho is in the lead with 49.9%, but the race is very tight. Turning to the race in Busan City, the Democratic Party of Korea's Jeon Jae-soo is going up against the People Power Party's Park Hyung-jun for mayor, and Jeon Jae-soo is ahead with 50.2%. Moving on to Gyeonggi-do, the nation's most populous province, the Democratic Party of Korea's Choo Mi-ae is going up against the People Power Party's Yang Yang-ja for the governor, and Choo Mi-ae is poised for a clear victory for now. For Incheon Mayor, the Democratic Party of Korea's Park Chan-dae is going up against the People Power Party's Yoo Jung-bok, and Park Chan-dae has the upper hand. When it comes to the Ulsan City Mayor position, the Democratic Party of Korea's Kim Sang-uk is going up against the People Power Party's Kim Du-kyum, and Kim Sang-uk is in the lead. Turning to Sejong, the Democratic Party of Korea's Jo Sang-ho is going up against the People Power Party's Choi Min-ho for mayor, and Jo Sang-ho has the big advantage at the moment. Moving on to the Daejeon mayoral race, the Democratic Party of Korea's Heo Tae-jung is facing up against the People Power Party's Lee Jang-woo, and according to the exit poll, Heo Tae-jung is currently holding the edge. Turning to the Jeonnam Gwangju City governor race, the Democratic Party of Korea's Min Young-bae is competing against the People Power Party's Lee Jung-hyun, and Min Young-bae appears to be leading quite significantly. In the race for Jeollabuk-do governor, Democratic Party of Korea's Lee Won-taek is up against independent candidate Kim Kwan-young, maintaining a lead with 48.5%. In Gangwon-do province, the Democratic Party of Korea's Woo Sang-woo is facing off against the People Power Party's Kim Jin-tae, and Woo Sang-woo is projected to come out on top based on the exit poll. In the Gyeongsangbuk-do province race, the Democratic Party of Korea's Oh Jung-gi is running against the People Power Party's Lee Cheol-woo, and Lee Cheol-woo has the significant lead. Turning to Gyeongsangnam-do province, the Democratic Party of Korea's Kim Kyung-soo is competing against the People Power Party's Park Kwan-soo, with Kim Kyung-soo enjoying an advantage at this stage. In the race for Chungcheongbuk-do governor, the Democratic Party of Korea's Shin Yong-han is taking on the People Power Party's Kim Myung-hwan, and Shin Yong-han has established an early lead. Turning to Chungcheongnam-do province, the Democratic Party of Korea's Park Soo-yeon is facing off against the People Power Party's Kim Tae-hum for governor, with Park Soo-yeon emerging as the frontrunner with 52.1%. Finally, on Jeju Island, the Democratic Party of Korea's Wi Sung-gun is competing against the People Power Party's Moon Sung-yu for the governor, and Wi Sung-gun appears to be leading based on the exit poll. Moving on to the by-elections, out of 14 local districts where by-elections are taking place, we need to take a look at two major areas. First, in Pyeongtaek B, the Democratic Party of Korea's Kim Yong-nam is competing against the People Power Party's Yoo Hee-dong and Rebuilding Korea Party's Jo-guk. Jo-guk is currently leading according to the exit poll, but it is indeed a very tight race. Finally, in the Busan-buk A by-election, the Democratic Party of Korea's Ha Jung-woo is running against the People Power Party's Park Min-sik and independent candidate Han Dong-hoon, with Ha Jung-woo out in front according to the exit poll, but in a tight race against Han Dong-hoon. This was the exit poll results provided by KBS. Again, do mind that this is exit poll results and that the vote counting is currently underway, which is in its very early stages. Back to you, Mo-kyun.
Thank you, Bo-kyung. Those early numbers are certainly giving us plenty to watch as the night unfolds. Now, nearly 3 hours have passed since polls closed, and vote counting is continuing across the country as election officials work through millions of ballots. Our reporter Cho Young-eun joins us from a counting station in Seoul. Young-eun, tell us, where are you exactly, and what are you seeing there at this hour?
Good evening, Mo-kyun. I'm currently standing at a ballot counting station at Seoul National University in Seoul's Gwanak-gu district, one of the 258 counting venues nationwide. Ballot counting here has been in full swing since 7:10. It's busy as it's all over the country, with more than 117,000 ballot counting personnel mobilized nationwide. In the center, frequent announcements are made to ensure the process runs smoothly and fairly, with counting staff carrying out their duties under instructions. Counting began as ballot boxes arrived under police escort and the presence of election observers, and as officials first inspected the ballot boxes for any signs of irregularities. During the process, officials are expected to manually inspect each ballot one by one, making sure votes are correctly counted and invalid ballots are properly identified before going through final verification process.
Right, Young-eun. So with that being said, then when are we likely to get a clearer sense of how these races are shaping up?
Well, the overall picture is expected to get closer in the coming hours, with more ballots continuing to be processed throughout the evening. As of 8:30 p.m., the ballot counting for Seoul mayor stands at 0.01%, while the counting rate for Incheon governor is at around 0.40%, and Busan governor at 0.93%. In regions where the gap between candidates is relatively wide, early projections of winners could begin emerging even before midnight. However, in closely contested battleground regions, clear results may not emerge until early tomorrow morning. With the additional manual verification process first introduced during the parliamentary elections 2 years ago, now also being applied to local elections, ballot counting is expected to take longer than it did 4 years ago. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Mogyan.
Thank you, Young-in. We'll continue to keep an eye on the count as more ballots are being processed. And now let's head to the headquarters of the two major parties for a closer look at the mood among party officials. Our political correspondents, Moon Hae-ryun and An Sung-jin, joins us live from their respective party headquarters. Hae-ryun, let's begin with you at the ruling Democratic Party headquarters. How are party officials reacting to the results so far?
Good evening, Morgan. It's been roughly 3 hours since the exit polls first came out, and when it did, the atmosphere inside the Democratic Party Situation Room here at the National Assembly's Members' Office building was electric. So the Democratic Party flagged 6 areas as the places to watch for tonight. So that includes Seoul, Busan, Daegu, Ulsan, and Gyeongsang-namdo and Jeollabuk-do provinces. So when the exit poll suggested the party was on course to take the majority of those battlegrounds, the relief in this room was palpable. The biggest reaction came with Seoul, the headline race of the night, where exit polls put the Democratic Party's candidate Chung Won-ho ahead, and the room erupted. But the applause continued as more favorable results came in from traditionally conservative strongholds such as Busan and Gyeongsang-namdo province, results that, if they hold, would represent a significant breakthrough for the DP. The DP said that the exit poll reflects public support for the Lee administration, with these elections being the first nationwide vote since he took office. The party leadership, Chairman Jang Cheong-nae and floor leader Han Byung-do, came in just before the exit polls began and joined the celebratory atmosphere. But it's still early, and party officials here stress that they'll be watching the counts closely as results come in through the night. And that's all I have for now, so back to you, Morgan.
Thank you, Hae-ryun, for that. Now let's see how the mood compares on the other side of the political aisle. Sung-jin, let's bring you in from the PPP headquarters in Yeouido. It's been about 3 hours since exit polls were released. How would you describe the mood over there?
Right. Good evening, Morgan. Just as you mentioned, it's been around 3 hours since the exit polls were first released at 6 p.m. And since then, the party's election situation room has sunk into silence, with most party officials, including Chairman Jang Dong-hyuk, having left long ago around 6:40 p.m. But the party has just convened an emergency briefing, so we will have to keep an eye on that for the details. Now, heavy silence has fell into the situation room over the party's election situation room immediately after the exit polls were released. Now, party officials who had been cautiously optimistic throughout the day were met with a sobering projection as the exit poll projected the People Power Party leading in only one of the 16 metropolitan and gubernatorial races. The party has managed to hold on to one of its traditional strongholds of Daegu, which is still considered a competitive race. Busan, Daegu, Jeollabuk-do province, and Gangwon-do province remain as closely contested areas. Now, though before polls closed at 6 p.m., chaos over a ballot shortage had left voters stranded in some polling stations in Korea. The PPP has demanded a full investigation, calling on the National Election Commission to guarantee every single citizen waiting in line is able to cast their ballots. Now, this outcome falls short of expectations within the party, which had hoped a late surge in conservative voter turnout could translate into victories across several of those competitive regions. The party will continue to monitor closely tied races in the competitive regions. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Mogyan.
And that was our correspondent, An Sung-jin, at the main opposition People Power Party headquarters. Thank you for the latest updates. And now it's a little past 9 p.m. here in Seoul, and while it is still early in the count, the first trends are beginning to emerge from today's local elections, and those early results are already offering clues about voter sentiment and the broader political landscape. To help us make sense of what we're seeing so far, we're joined in the studio by Choi Hyun-jin, professor of political science at Kyunghee University. A very big welcome, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the numbers first, Professor. So voter turnout, it appears to be rising from the previous local elections, and also it followed a record early voter turnout, of course. So what does today's turnout tell us about voter sentiment?
Yes, we had a 61% voter turnout. It's quite high for local election. And also it is almost more than 10 percentage point higher than the previous local election. And also it came after a record high early voting rate of 23.5%. I think this shows a very high level of people's interest and also political engagement. And also looking at the result of exit poll, it appears that this high turnout rate worked more in favor of the Democratic Party, the ruling party. So many voters seem to have used this election to give their support to the new Lee Jae-myung administration and also give President Lee an opportunity to move forward with his agenda. At the same time, this result at the exit poll may also show some disappointment with the opposition, the People Power Party. So I think today's turnout shows both support for the new administration and also warning message to the opposition.
Right, so a whopping 61% as of now. It's quite big. And so what can this large, high turnout actually say about the actual results?
Yes, whenever there's some increasing, voting turnout, both parties, claim that this high turnout helped them, right? So, for example, Democratic Party argues that the high turnout shows that more voters came to support the government, while the opposition party argues that the people want to check the government, right? But however, what matters is not just how many people voted, okay? What is more important is, who voted and also where they voted. And therefore, only using the single turnout rate, it's very difficult to predict the outcome. For example, if a turnout rate is especially high among voters in their 30, 40, and 50, it is a good sign and it may be more favorable to the Democratic Party. But however, if the turnout rate is higher among young generation, for example, in their 20s, and also older people over 60, it could be a good sign for the People Power Party. So regional patterns also matter. Take Seoul, for example. If there's high turnout rate in conservative districts such as Gangnam, maybe it could be more favorable to their sitting mayor Oh Se-hoon. But if the turnout rate is higher in other parts of the city, it could be good for the challenger Chung Won-woo. So, what the key question is not how many people voted. It is the key question is which party did a better job of bringing their supporters to the voting booths.
Right. So higher turnout doesn't necessarily point out to a particular political direction we're seeing. Now we have moved from voting to counting at this hour. Were there any early results that caught your attention tonight, Professor?
Yes. So it's too early to predict the final outcome, but only look at the result of the exit poll. So what stands out to me is the overall picture. So the exit polls show that the Democratic Party is leading in many parts of the country. So it is ahead in 11 out of the 17 governor and mayor races, while the People Power Party is leading only in one province, that is Gyeongbuk. And several other provinces, like 5 races, remain very close. Okay. What I find especially interesting is that the Democratic Party is not only doing well in its traditional strongholds such as Jeolla province, but it is also doing very well, leading or competing strongly in places such as Seoul, Busan, Ulsan, and Gangwon. So because Busan, Ulsan, and Gangwon are typically considered as a so-called swing province in South Korean politics, but this Democratic Party is now leading or competing strongly in those areas as well. So another result that caught my attention is Daegu. So Daegu is one of the strongest conservative strongholds in South Korean politics. In my memory, I never saw the conservative candidate lost in Daegu in the past. But the exit poll shows that the race is very close. Okay, it's too close to call between Chu Kyung-ho and Kim Bu-kyum right now. So this is a big change. So if these exit poll results are confirmed based on this assumption, so tonight may be remembered as more than just a victory for one party. I think it may suggest that some traditional regional voting patterns are becoming weaker than in the past.
Right, so it could be a sign of a lot of changes from traditional, what we've been seeing in the past. So like you've said, you've mentioned some regional changes. Could you elaborate for us a little bit more? Are there any races or regions that could end up having outsized political significance once the votes are all counted?
Yes, I would point three places. Of course, the first one is Seoul. So Seoul is the capital city, and also Seoul is always considered the most important political battleground between the two rival political parties. And also it has the second largest number of voters next to Gyeonggi province. And the result in Seoul is often seen as the outcome of the national mood. Okay? And also if the Democratic Party wins Seoul, many people will see this result as a strong signal of support for the new administration. And also in the past, generally, the winner of the Seoul mayor election tend to be considered as a strong candidate for the next presidential election as well. And also secondly, Daegu, as I said earlier, for a long time, Daegu has been one of the strongest conservative region in South Korea. But the exit poll now shows that there is a very close race in Daegu. If voting patterns begin to change, even in Daegu for the first time, that could be one of the most important political stories of tonight, I think. And third, Busan. Busan is the second largest city in South Korea and has long been considered as also some conservative city in South Korean politics. But the race there is also very close. So although it's hard to predict the final outcome, but even this competition, the close race in the city of Busan is another sign that the regional political patterns may be changing in South Korea. So I would watch Seoul, Daegu, and Busan very carefully. And the result in those three places may tell us more about the future direction of South Korean politics than other areas.
Right. So the results in those three areas would ultimately help shape the narrative of tonight. Now, many people have been saying this is the first nationwide election since the Lee administration took office. To what extent do you think this could be seen as an assessment of this first year of the Lee administration?
Yes, I think many voters in South Korea saw this local election not just as a local election. So I think it was the first nationwide election since the beginning of the Lee Jae-myung administration just about 1 year ago. And many voters are using this election to express their view on the incumbent government and also the opposition party. So if the exit polls are confirmed, the many voters seem to have given President Lee and also his new government some positive early report card. So there has been some achievement made by President Lee. For example, the recent surge in Korean stock market. Recently we witnessed a record high number of so-called Kospi index. And also there has been some successful stories of South Korean semiconductor industry. And also there has been some tough negotiation with the Donald Trump administration to make a trade deal. So based on this exit poll result, it seems to me that some voters give some positive evaluation of this achievement made by this new administration. But there may be another message as well. So it seems to me that many voters appear unhappy with the opposition party. There's Conservative People Power Party. So in general, tonight's result may be seen not only as a support for the President Lee Jae-myung, but also as a warning sign to the Conservative Party. So this election is not only about the future of President Lee, may also about the future of conservatism in South Korea.
Right, so it does really send a message to both parties right now. But when we look beyond just winners and losers of this elections, what do you think would be the broader political significance of the results coming in tonight?
Yes, I think today's result, although it's hard to predict final outcome, but the exit poll result suggests that there's important implication about the current balance of power in South Korean politics. The Democratic Party appears to be winning not only in its traditional strongholds such as Jeolla province, but also in several other key battlefield regions, so-called swing areas. So at the same time, the results also suggest that the Conservative Party is facing a serious challenge. So many voters seem unhappy with the PPP, and many people feel that the party has not shown enough change since the impeachment of the former President Yoon Suk-yeol. So the bigger question is now not only what this means for President Lee's government, okay, but the bigger question is what happens to the conservative camp in South Korean politics. So can PPP change and rebuild the political trust and attract more voters in the future? And then maybe one of the most important political stories to watch in the years ahead. And also the second implication of this election is polarization. So the this election process reminds us that the political division within South Korea still remain a major challenge for us. So there's a regional voting patterns. There's still regional voting patterns in South Korea, but today there's political divisions are shaped by age, generation, gender, and ideology. So in other words, the people are somehow polarized into two rival camps. So in many ways, the South Korean politics has become more polarized than the simple regional divide over the past. And therefore, the bigger story tonight may not simply who won and who lost. So the bigger question is whether South Korean political parties can regain its political trust, and also how can they build broader support across different groups of voters.
Indeed. So this implications could extend well beyond just this election cycle. Now, finally, so as we are waiting for the results to come out, Professor, what will you be watching most closely over the next couple of hours?
Tonight, I'll be watching the close races. So in the governor and mayor races, I will focus on places such as Daegu, Busan, Chungbuk, Chungnam, Jeonbuk, and Gyeongnam, okay, where the margins are still very small, okay, between candidates. So these races will help us understand whether the exit polls accurately predict the actual outcome. So I will also paying attention to the by-election for the National Assembly. So there has been some very interesting two by-election campaign. One race that stands out is Busan Bukgap, where independent candidate Han Dong-hoon is running strongly against the Democratic candidate Ha Jung-woo. And that race could become a very important implication for the future of the conservative camp, because independent candidate Han Dong-hoon is the former head of the PPP party. And another important race is Pyeongtaek-eul in Gyeonggi province, where three candidates, Kim Yong-nam, Yoo Hee-dong, and Jo Guk, are competing very closely. It's really impossible to predict the outcome in this district. The result there may tell us something about the future shape of opposition politics. So over the next few hours and night, I will be looking at who wins, but also how close these races are in these so-called swing areas. Sometimes the margin can tell us as much as the winner.
Right, definitely. So we'll be certainly watching for how these results would continue to unfold in the coming hours. But as for now, thank you so much for your insights tonight, Professor Che.
Thank you very much.
In other news, the OECD has significantly upgraded Korea's growth outlook, citing strong semiconductor demand. The forecast was raised to 2.6%, with further upside movement seen if demand continues to strengthen. Kim Jun-hong has the details.
The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has sharply raised its growth outlook for the Korean economy to 2.6% this year. In a report released Wednesday, the organization raised the growth forecast for this year by 0.9 percentage points from March, marking the largest upward revision among G20 economies after previously lowering its outlook amid the Middle East conflict. Growth for next year, however, was projected at 1.9%, down 0.2 percentage points from the previous forecast. Semiconductors were pointed to as key drivers behind Korea's stronger outlook. The OECD said growth could exceed projections if demand for advanced chips strengthens further. It also cited solid export growth and chip-led investment, while consumer spending is expected to gradually recover with fiscal support. Yet supply disruptions tied to the Middle East conflict, labor disputes, and export restrictions were pointed out as downside risks. The consumer price index for this year was also revised to 2.6%, down 0.1 percentage point. Inflation is expected to ease to 2.2% next year, with the OECD saying it is falling back to the Bank of Korea's target level. The organization also said government-led measures, including price caps and fuel tax cuts, are likely to help cushion inflationary pressure caused by energy supply disruptions. Global growth is forecast at 2.8% this year and 3.1% next year, as the OECD warned of pressure from rising energy prices and trade disruptions linked to the Strait of Hormuz. Kim Junong, Arirang News.
South Korea and the United States have concluded their first round of talks on nuclear-powered submarines and civil nuclear cooperation. The latest consultations are expected to continue as soon as next month. Oh Soo-young reports.
Korea and the United States are moving to the next stage of talks on nuclear-powered submarines and civil nuclear cooperation, with a second round expected as early as next month, a clear sign of efforts to modernize the alliance. According to the Foreign Ministry on Wednesday, the two sides wrapped up their first working-level consultations in Seoul, aimed at implementing the security pillar of their joint fact sheet, based on key agreements between Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Donald Trump last year. The ministry said both sides agreed to pursue tangible outcomes as quickly as possible, establish a mechanism to review progress throughout the year, and accelerate future consultations. During the 2 days of talks in Seoul, Korea's push to develop nuclear-powered submarines was among the key issues discussed. Sessions on Tuesday focused on cooperation related to securing nuclear fuel for the submarines, while the second day centered on Seoul's long-standing interest in obtaining greater authority over uranium enrichment and spent fuel reprocessing for civilian nuclear purposes. An official said the talks allowed Seoul to explain its goals in greater detail, while also underscoring both sides' commitment to implementing their leaders' agreement and advancing efforts to modernize and expand the alliance. The official added that Korea hopes to hold a second round of talks as early as next month, possibly in Washington, D.C., where Seoul expects the US to respond in greater detail to its proposals on enrichment and pyroprocessing. During the first round, Washington is said to have raised a series of questions about Korea's plans as the two sides explore possible revisions to their nuclear cooperation agreement. Under the existing accord, Korea may enrich uranium below 20% only with mutual written consent, a framework Seoul has long argued limits its flexibility. The first round of talks was launched this week by First Vice Foreign Minister Park Yoon-joo and US Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs Alison Hooker. Foreign Minister Cho Hyun also met Hooker on Wednesday morning and later visited the consultation venue. Taking to X, Cho posted that the two countries agreed that close communication and cooperation are more important than ever amid rapidly changing global circumstances. He said both governments would work faithfully and promptly implement the commitments reached by their presidents last fall and further upgrade the alliance. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Elsewhere, Iranian drone and missile attacks have caused Kuwait International Airport to shut down operations on Wednesday. The drone attack came after Iran and the United States traded missile strikes late Tuesday. Cha Yun-kyung has the story.
The Civil Aviation Authority of Kuwait, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, has announced that Kuwait International Airport was severely hit by Iranian drones and missiles on Wednesday, causing injuries and significant damage to buildings. The DGCA added that it activated an emergency plan to suspend and divert flights until further notice. In a statement from a Defense Ministry spokesman, the Kuwaiti Armed Forces are monitoring the situation and remain on full alert to respond to further attacks. The drone attack came after Iran and the United States traded missile strikes late Tuesday. According to Reuters on Wednesday, Tehran launched the offensive as a direct retaliation to a U.S. strike on an Iranian tanker near the Strait of Hormuz and a military communications tower on Kishim Island. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claims to have hit the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain using a barrage of missiles and drones. U.S. Central Command, however, has firmly rejected these assertions. In a public statement, CENTCOM said that all recent Iranian attacks directed at American forces failed, and that incoming projectiles were either intercepted or fell short of their targets. Talks for a ceasefire in the Iran war and the loosening of Iran's chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz have become increasingly conjoined with the conflict in Lebanon. Meanwhile, negotiations between the United States and Iran are apparently ongoing. Amid reports from Iranian media that the talks had been halted due to fighting in Lebanon, U.S. President Donald Trump wrote on Truth Social that such reports were false and erroneous, and emphasized that negotiations had been going on continuously, though where the talks were leading was still unknown. His refutal came after Iranian news agencies reported that the clashes on Tuesday were triggered when Iran stopped communicating with mediators about extending a ceasefire. Cha Yoon-kyo, Arirang News.
And that wraps up our Election Day special coverage. This was Kim Mo-kyan. Thank you for watching.